Hey y'all, today we got some baseball content because if you haven't been watching, the Philadelphia Phillies kick off next week, or first pitch is next week. Timestamp in this for you all. And we have Frank Klose from 97.3 ESPN, the Sports Bash with Mike Gill. Frank, how's it going, man?
Hey, it's going. How are you doing?
You know, work is just it just continues, and for the people who've listened to a couple of these, they know that this isn't what I do. This is one of my passions, and so the work has been very accelerated, but I always make time to get on and talk Philly sports or sports in general. I think what I like about doing the show is that I kind of try to keep it obviously I'm going to put my cards on the table, in terms of who I support and who I want to win. But I also do that from the perspective of, and being honest, every Phillies player every Sixers or Eagle isn't going to be, the best player, or their contract isn't going to, dictate that they actually give us the best output, but you're going to get, my honest take. And so, Frank, getting into it, we got some rough news over I had a whole thing that, of course, if you listen again, you know that I sent over the topics to people, give them a chance to kind of digest on it. And then at the end, I was like, oh yeah, like this is, to me, in my mind, it was old news, but Rhys Hoskins going down, it's only happened in the last few hours, and it's a pretty big one. I mean, what are your thoughts on that, just to start there?
Well, obviously not ideal. Rhys Hoskins has been, while streaky at the end of the season, it's his numbers, if you look at them from his career, they're oddly consistent. Like his career average might be 264.
That's right.
And you look, one year he's 266, one year he's 263, one year he's 265. And he's good for 30 home runs. So that's going to be tough to replace. So the fact that he's a right-handed bat, among a lot of good lefties, a lot of power in the Phillies lineup comes from left-handed hitters. He was one of the power right-handed bats. Going to be kind of tough to make up for that. But I will say the Phillies, the depth, if that had to happen to somebody, their depth is pretty good to handle it. So it's not good, and you probably will see them slip backwards a little bit, at least to start, because by the trade deadline maybe they can get some extra help if they need it. But you never want to see that. And plus too, if you follow the Phillies very closely, you know that this is Hoskins' last year of his contract.
That's right.
The Phillies,
or it was a 1 year. Didn't they do like a 1 year re-up for $12 million, I think?
Yeah, but they had control of him under his rookie contract through this year. So after this year, he would be a free agent, and his future, and honestly, his future as a Philly was probably in doubt beyond this year.
Okay.
And so you kind of thought that this would be his last hurrah. There were times before I talked about maybe seeing if there was a trade opportunity for the Phillies, because he probably wasn't coming back after this year. Maybe try to capitalize on that. But at the end, it seemed like it made more sense that you hold on to him for the year. And just even if it means letting him go as a free agent, Dave Dombrowski spoke openly about wanting to re-sign Aaron Nola, but when it came to Rhys Hoskins, he was not as committed to that. So basically, it was, oh yeah, we really like Rhys, but we'll see what happens. Well, so I mean, it's very possible that he's played his last game as a Philly, and you hate to see that happen this way.
Yeah. What do you think? Obviously retweet and all of that on what you just said. It's all, it's a bummer that he's out, but so I don't want to just too quickly move past that. But moving past that, like, what are the Phillies going to do in terms of the sports? This sucked on a personal level. This just stinks. But in terms of the sports, what are the Phillies going to do?
Well, they have Derek Hall. That's the obvious solution, at least at first. Now, Hall, I don't think, is generally considered much of a defender. Not that Hoskins was considered much of a defender either, but Hall is somebody who can get a real opportunity here. In fact, Dave Dombrowski said that, well, the Cubs going to prepare for Derek Hall to be the starting first baseman for at least to start. Now, I know he says that, but I also know that makes him very left-handed at times, and there'll be times they don't want a left-handed bat there. They might play Alec Boehm at first and put Edmundo Sosa at third base or Josh Harrison into the lineup. Or they have options. Again, I said they have options. So I think that would work because Hall probably would have gotten a lot of designated hitter at bats, and now they can give those DH bats to somebody you want to get out of the field, like a Schwarber or Castellanos. It's an opportunity to
It's
maybe
true.
focus on the defense a little bit. If you're losing some of the offense, well, maybe you can. It's true.
Yeah,
You can make up for some of the offense lost by improving the defense a little bit. So the Phillies have options. JT Realmuto is not getting younger. They got a lot out of him last year, but a couple of years before we saw him break down just a little bit towards the end. Not that he was injured in any way, but you get that's a tough position behind the plate. You get banged up, so I think they would love to make sure he DHs a little bit. So if you had Hall firmly implanted as DH, then you wouldn't have been able to do that. If he's over first base, then that frees that DH spot up a little bit for them to sort of cycle some of those guys through. So I would imagine that that's what they're going to do. Take advantage of the DH position, try to keep people off their feet and off the field, especially in the early going before Bryce Harper comes back. Because once Bryce Harper comes back, then that DH spot is going to be his. There's no ifs, ands, or buts, right?
No question about it.
And then you can reassess, right? But for now, Hall's kind of that left-handed bat to basically still kind of fill the Harper void a little bit, but then now there's an extra void there. But I think they'll do their best to mix and match and play the matchups and try to maximize that extra spot on the roster.
So you don't want to see Bryce in the field once he's back? You don't.
Oh, he won't be able to. He won't be able to throw probably till towards the season's end, if at all. So I think he's
okay.
Yeah, the recovery of the injury is going to allow him to DH, and that's about it. You don't want to risk him tearing that UCL again. So I think the throwing is not going to be in the cards for him until at the very least. I think beforehand they were talking about him maybe being able to take the field again in September-ish, maybe. But you don't want to mess with that if possible. So I mean, I think the Phillies are a better team when they have Bryce Harper in the outfield instead of a Castellanos or Schwarber. But it looks like that'll be the following season that you're really going to be able to count on Harper being in the outfield full time.
So how do you feel about how they're fair up until about the All-Star break? This is what Bryce has said, and then others have chimed in more recently and said that they think that he'll get back before then. But how do you think they'll fare? Let's say that he's right about his body and he's not back until the All-Star break. How do you think the Phils will fare up in that until that time?
Well, last year we kept hearing about how much easier, quote unquote, the Phillies schedule was down the stretch. This year it's kind of opposite. I think they have a tougher schedule down the stretch. So I'm kind of hoping that the timing works out together. Now, Dave Dombrowski took the step of saying, hey, we're not going to put Bryce on the 60-day injured list. And that's basically saying we want to keep open the possibility that he's back before May 29th. Because when they set the roster to start the season, they can put him on the 60-day IL and have an extra roster spot for another player in the 40-man roster. But they might forgo that just because they want to keep open the possibility he's back sooner. And I know Larry Bow was on WIP-FM saying, "Oh yeah, he's going to be back before the All-Star break," and he looks like he's doing okay. I mean, I guess what matters is his swing, right? So he's taking dry swings, meaning he's not making any contact yet. Once he gets going with that, you'll have a better idea about how long he'll be. But the Phillies want to keep open the possibility he could be back. Maybe is before May 29th. I don't know when exactly in that 60-day period he might show up, but the Phillies don't want to give up any of those 60 days if the possibility exists. So they're kind of taking an optimistic approach. But I think it's also good that their schedule favors them up until around the time he comes back. Either way, but it's a tough road down the stretch, and I think it'd be great that he should be back for it.
And they'll be battle tested, is what you're telling. Forecast is for the Phillies for us to get a good preview of whether they're ready to go or not for the long term. Once the late season push is upon us.
And they have these few injuries now, but let's be honest, those injuries happen during the season too, so you never know what's going to happen. I mean, certainly the Mets have had two tough injuries. They lost one of their starting pitchers and their all-star closers, so you never know in this game, right? But so last year they made some really good adjustments at the All-Star break, and they could always do the same this year.
So who are you taking to give them some resistance I mean, the Mets and the Braves are always good. The Marlins for some reason are always, it seem to be worth watching against the Phillies. What are you thinking inside the division? Do you think that the Phillies will be looking up all season at somebody, or will they be the class of this division?
I still pick the Braves to win the division. I did last year, and I never gave up on them. Even I was on with Ryan Rothstein on WIP last summer. It was still when the Braves still were like 6 behind the Mets. I'm like, Braves are going to win that division, and hopefully people took my advice and bet on the Braves. I'm not a betting guy, but I know Ryan's got a betting show
Yeah.
I've done too. But I was like, hopefully I made some of his listeners some money. But
It's a steady bet because the Braves are just good. They're just a
yeah, the
good
Braves are
team.
really
They
good
run
and
their
they're young. Yeah.
organization well. Yeah.
And to be very honest, the injuries that we're seeing on the Phillies, they tend to happen when you're a little bit older. I mean, not that Rhys Hoskins is old by any stretch of the imagination, right? But maybe when you're younger, that doesn't happen the same way. So
That's right. That's right.
he's 30. I mean, 30 is not old. I mean, 30 is old, then I'm way
No.
old, right? But
Most of the people who like my show are over 30, but
yeah, yeah. So I mean, no disrespect to them, but
so for all of you, for all of us who are over 30, it's just that's why it's a young man. I mean, tends to be a young man's game.
yeah. So I like that they're young. That means they're a little more agile. They're a little less likely to get hurt. You might be able to get a little bit more out of them, and they've got some really talented players. Now they let Dansby Swanson go without really replacing him. The two guys the Braves declared to
Yeah.
be in competition for the shortstop position. Neither player is making the opening day roster. So, but aside from that, it's hard to knock the Braves. I mean, that's. I don't know that that's losing one player is a difference maker. Now the Mets, I have them behind the Phillies. I thought it was, you're subtracting Chris Bassett and
I
Jacob
agree.
deGrom and adding
Yep.
Jose Quintana, who's already hurt, and
Yep.
they added Justin Verlander, who is older than I am, or I think he's older than I am. So he's old, right? Talking about ages in baseball. But, I think that's really risky when you got a couple of 40-plus-year-olds. Are they four? I don't even know if they're exactly four. I don't know. Maybe I don't have a calendar
No,
with my birthdays.
Verlander's 40 plus, and
Yeah,
he's I think Verlander
I
might
got to
be
look
like
this up
42
because
years
I
because they were talking about it after the World Series because he had a couple. He got to get redeemed. I think he pitched a great game 5 against us, so he got kind of bombed on in game 1.
yeah.
Let's
Okay.
find out.
Verlander just turned 40 last month,
Oh
and
wow!
then Scherzer turns. Okay, Scherzer only turns 39 this summer. But anyway, my point is
I
that's
was
a
wrong.
little
Thanks for the
risky
listeners.
when you're subtracting Bassett and DeGrom and then adding those two. Now, I thought Bassett was money last year for the Mets. They're going to really miss him, and Degrom. Of course he gets hurt now and then, but they're really going to miss him. And Carlos Carrasco, he's he was born in '87, so he's the young man of the top three, right? But um but someone who's 35 and has had some issues in the past, or excuse me, 36 now. I don't know that they can necessarily. He had a full season last year for the most part, but that I think they're walking a tightrope here, and without Edwin Diaz at the back of the bullpen and David Robertson, God bless him, he's also up there in years, but they're having their 37-year-old David Robertson be their closer, and how's his durability an extra year out of his surgery, right? I mean, he was serviceable for the Phillies last year, big part of why they made the playoffs. But David Robertson is not Edwin Diaz in his prime, even though I like David Robertson. So,
Yeah,
I
I
think the
mean,
Phillies are
yeah.
kind of a second place team, but that probably puts them into be a wild card again, as we saw last year. they get in, they're perhaps well primed for the playoffs, especially now with this new bullpen they have.
No, I totally agree with you. And I mean, I don't think, to be honest, and this is just the sports fan hat on, I don't expect the Mets to be a 500 ball club. They'll be around 500, but they're not going to be. I don't think when, all 162 have been played, the Mets will be on the right side of that one. So
Yeah, there's a lot of good stuff going on there, certainly with the Mets, but I just think that they're walking too much of a tightrope. I think something will happen that kind of keeps them from really. And put it this way: there's nothing that they're doing wrong per se. I mean, Steve Cohen, their owner, Forbes announced that the Mets lost like 130 some $1 million last year, right? So he's spending his money just to try to win. Like this is his
yep, no
this
question.
like for him, it's like I might come up with $75 to have a fantasy team. Like this is his fantasy team. And it cost, relatively speaking, this is less than the $75 I might put out, right? He's got
Yep,
that much money. So he's trying everything he can to bring whatever talent in he can. But you know what? It's he bought a team that was flawed, and while he's doing his
absolutely.
best, I mean, any team with Lindor and Alonso in the lineup, right? As like your 3-4, they're going to score a lot of runs. Period. And you just
I
gotta.
got them as a 80 and 82. I got them as a 80 and 82 ball club.
And by the way, it does help. I would put them a tick above that because right now the schedule is changing in Major League Baseball. It used to be that the Phillies, Braves, Mets, Nationals, Marlins all played each other 18 times. It's going to be now 12 times as they play other teams around the league. Now, there's other good teams around baseball, right? You're playing every team now. I mean, this is the first time that's ever happening. So I mean, they are playing a lot of other good teams too. But in the National League, especially, um, this is probably this in the West, right? So you have to face the Giants, Dodgers, Padres, as you usually did. But then now you're seeing the tough AL teams too, right? So you're definitely playing the Astros. Every team's playing the Astros, right? So it's not just you're switching divisions. So I think it'll be new challenges, but they're not going to beat up on each other as much. So that's the interesting thing here, and I'm not sure yet how that's going to play out.
How's that? As far as the other people to come out of their respective divisions, is there anybody that Phillies fans should be looking out for? Should the Phillies even make it to the playoffs, by the way, y'all? But I think they will. But once they get there, who are the people?
Yeah, that's a very good question. I mean, not much has. I feel like not much has changed from the usual landscape of playoff teams this year. Um, the Padres, of course, they're still trying really, really hard in the West, right? So the Phillies, of course, beat them in the NLCS. The Dodgers are the Dodgers, right? So in the West you have those. The Giants are still decent enough. I don't know that they move the needle to get back to being a playoff team like they were the year before. But in the Central, Brewers, Cardinals, I don't think a whole lot has changed there either, right? So I mean, it's usually for right now anyway. It seems like it's a lot of the same old in the National League, and the AL. You know what? I think the Astros again. You saw how good they were in the World Series, right? I mean, I know as a Phillies fan, someone might have wanted them to beat the Astros, but I think you could at least appreciate how good they were after walking away.
Absolutely.
So
They
that
were a
they're going
great
to be
team.
good as usual. Yeah, they'll be good as usual. In the East, the Yankees will be good as usual. I guess the one question would be the Texas Rangers. They're still trying and trying to rebuild that. They added DeGrom. Of course, that was the big splash after lots of other financial big splashes the year before. So it's interesting that we'll see that there's an ascent there, but a lot of good talent in the East with Toronto, of course, is still around and good. And then in the West, I still like Seattle. I think they've done a good job. Tampa Bay is always good. I mean, so it's kind of the usual suspects. But if there's any team that might be taking strides, I know the Texas Rangers perhaps, but yeah, I mean Baltimore, they did better last year, but they're still Baltimore. The Pirates are
Right.
still the Pirates. I think we're seeing a lot more of the same. Now, I don't
I
expect any
just,
surprise
yeah.
teams.
Yeah, I mean, and to fans of those teams, I mean, you know it to be true too. I mean, we'll kind of, to see you see the Pittsburgh Pirates, like even in the playoff contention, you're kind of like, okay, let's kind of root for them. If they're not playing my team, let's see how they're doing. But
Yeah.
come on, come
I like
on.
hey, I like going to Pittsburgh. I love PNC Park. I think it's a great
That's
place to
right.
watch
Great
games.
part. Yeah.
And yeah, my uncle used to live in Youngstown, Ohio. So like I used to meet him a lot I drive out there to have a meal with him at a restaurant, and then I'd see whoever the Pirates were playing that night. So
That's right.
I saw lots of games and with Kutch in his prime. That's kind of cool. Andrew McCutcheon's back, but but unfortunately they're still a little light on that roster.
Yeah, I mean, they're another one of those who are like, we'll talk about maybe getting in that 80 win range, something like that. But
Yeah,
not seriously. If you still see the Pirates on your schedule, you should probably get if it's a 3-game series, you need to go pick up 2 out of 3 against Pittsburgh.
yeah, I would say that's fair. And the kind of additions they made now, O'Neal Cruz is a nice looking shortstop, and Cabrian Hayes, Charlie Hayes' kid, he's a nice player, but they've filled the roster with Carlos Santana, kind of past his prime at this point. Of course, Austin Hedges, the one-time untouchable prospect who's now like a journeyman almost. Like I just don't see the. Yeah, it's just more of the same. So, um, but I always try to get out there when the Phillies play there because I do really like that park. Not to spend all my time talking about the Pirates.
It was a long time to talk about the Pirates. Kind of jumped
Yeah,
out to me, but
I like Kutch.
so
Everybody likes Kutch. Kutch was always one
we'll
of my
land
favorite
here
players.
with the Phils.
What's that?
Absolutely. How could you not like Kutch? He just seems like a
Oh,
great guy. How couldn't someone not like Kutch? He just seems like a great guy. I
love
mean,
him.
you root for him, but yeah. So, uh, who do you think will be the Phillies MVP this year? Let's not talk about league
That's a
MVP, but
very
for
easy
the for
answer.
the team.
Very easy answer. Trey Turner, and I think Trey Turner is going to be a candidate for National League MVP. Man, just seeing him at the
Wow,
World Baseball Classic, you know what? He was, of course, electric.
he's on a heater.
Oh man, that was I mean, he's always been a tremendous player, always been super talented. But just thinking of him playing with the guys he's playing with, he's going to be something. And I think he'll the West Coast already knows how good he is from his time in
Yeah.
LA. The National League East should know about him from his days with the Nationals. But man, I think he's really in his prime, and Phillies are getting him at just the right time. I think he was perfect for this Phillies team. I think he's going to love playing here. I think he's going to I think he's going to have a huge season for this Phillies team.
I mean, he kind of, now that he's putting Trey Turner with the power in the bag, or like a serious, 40 threat to be a 30, 40 home run guy, that's a league MVP candidate because he's going to be a 5-tool player. I mean, we'll see.
He does it all.
We'll get a chance to see. If you haven't heard about him, guys, Trey Turner's a pretty good baseball player.
Oh, he could be probably a good football player too, right?
Trey Turner, he'd be a halfback. You have to put Trey Turner at halfback. He'd be a little scat back out there, catching some passes. But Frank, thank you so much for coming on. It's always great talking Phils with you. Where can we catch you next, and where can we follow on social media?
Well, if you can follow 97.3 ESPN at 97.3ESPN.com, you can stream and listen. I'm usually on the air every Tuesday afternoon with Mike Gill and the Sports Bash. And check out the Powder Blue Podcasts at Powder Blue Pod on Twitter. You can find our newest episodes there, or follow us in any place that you get your podcasts. We'll be there.
Awesome. Thanks, Frank. Take care.
Thanks so much, Matt.